The president's Iran peace plan is already benefiting Americans. Last night, 12.5 million barrels of oil passed through the Strait of Hormuz. This is an increase since the beginning of the conflict. Oil prices have dropped almost to pre-conflict levels. Gasoline prices fell below $4 per gallon today for the first time since the conflict, and it's important that they will continue to drop even further given the decline in oil prices. On the military side, the Iranians for the second consecutive night have not fired at any ships in the Strait of Hormuz so far. They are honoring their commitment. As for the blockade, CENTCOM has allowed more than a dozen ships to pass, also honoring our initial part of the agreement. On the military side, some things are still true and will continue to be, whether the Iranians comply with the rest of the agreement or not. Number one, their nuclear program has been completely destroyed and paralyzed. Their enrichment capability, the facilities they use to develop enrichment and a potential nuclear weapon, remain destroyed. Their conventional army remains destroyed. Their ability to threaten their neighbors has disappeared. And now we'll see if they are willing to comply with the next important step of the president's peace plan. As everyone knows, part of the peace agreement, part of this memorandum that the media misrepresented, is the idea that the Iranians get all the benefits. You'll hear about $300 billion, $24 billion, or this or that amount of money. And the fact is that the only way for the Iranians to get any of those resources, not a cent from the United States of America under any circumstances, but the only way for them to get any benefit is if they fully comply and change their behavior. And so, you really have a win-win situation for the United States of America. If the Iranians don't change their behavior, their military and nuclear program will be destroyed. If they change their behavior, then they will have a truly transformative relationship with the Middle East, and the Middle East will have an equally transformative relationship with the people of Iran. That's a victory for the American people and for the President of the United States, regardless of which option the Iranians choose. We want them to choose the right option. The interesting thing about their system, and I think it's important for the American people to appreciate this point, is that there are real divisions in their country about how to proceed. And what we've seen in recent months is that the pragmatists within the Iranian system, the people who really want to transform their relationship with the Middle East and with the world, those people are winning the argument. The United States wants those people to win the argument. The United States wants to have a better relationship, but for that to happen, the Iranians need to take action. If they don't deliver results, as we've said, they won't get the agreement's benefits. I ask everyone to report honestly that the United States didn't get the expected outcome.
Isn't it true that giving a single cent to Iran, including economic benefits, sanctions relief, and the rest of this agreement, only happens if the Iranians comply? So with that, I thank all of you. It's good to be with you this morning. And now I'll take questions. Let's start right here on the right.
Thank you. Senior Vice President, I have a follow-up about your recent comment regarding the chance of Iran's current leadership fundamentally changing its behavior. Do you think the current Iranian leadership recognizes the level of influence that Zilmiyua has over it economically and militarily enough to actually move toward fundamentally changing its behavior in the long term and start acting differently?
Gentlemen, I think they recognize the influence that the United States has over them. We've seen this in several conversations and in their behavior over the past 2 days. They recognize that Zilmi has great leverage. Will this ultimately lead to a change in behavior? I don't know. Some skeptics are already saying the Iranians won't change their behavior under the agreement. Maybe that's true, and if it is, they don't get any of the benefits of the agreement. But isn't it worth trying? Isn't it worth seeing if this incredibly weakened position that the President of the United States has put the Iranians in motivates them to change their behavior, not just toward the West, but toward the Middle East as well? One interesting thing about this is that, we can get into the technical details of it, of course. There will be countless opinions about the negotiation, about where it will end up going, but I tend to think that you should trust those who know the Iranians best and have the most to lose. What are the Gulf Arab states saying about this deal? What are they saying about this deal compared to the JCPOA in 2015? This is Obama's nuclear deal. Well, at that time, they hated this deal. They felt it empowered the Iranians to be bad actors throughout the region, and of course, that's exactly what happened. They were right. And what do they say about the president's peace deal? They say it's very transformative for the region, because in any case, we and the region as a whole benefit. Iran is weakened, its nuclear program destroyed, its economy in desperate straits, and if they change their behavior, great things will happen for Iran and for the world. If they don't change, we won't suffer any losses. Either way, we win, and that's how the president structured this deal and this negotiation.
Just a quick housekeeping question. You already answered that in the opening. But did the 60-day period officially start yesterday?
I would say that the 60-day period officially started today. It was signed late, and it might even have been technically signed, because of the time zone. I think technically it was signed today in Iran's time zone. So yes, the agreement started yesterday. Let's start the 60-day countdown today.
Initially, the main goal was to dismantle it. Yesterday, he said it would be fair if Iran's neighboring countries also had some. So, when and why did that change, and will the final agreement have restrictions on those missiles?
So, we destroyed a substantial number of their ballistic missiles and their launchers. It's not just the bullets, but the weapon itself. And that's what we've been extremely effective at destroying in the last 3 months of the campaign. All the president said yesterday was that, of course, the countries in the region do not give up their right to self-defense. Israel does not give up its right to self-defense if Hezbollah fires rockets at Israel. The Iranians do not give up their right to self-defense in their country. But we hope that, as part of the final agreement, they will not build missiles that could threaten the whole world. And that's what the President of the United States said yesterday. And look, it's very simple. You can't tell a country, whether it's Israel or Iran, that it doesn't have the right to self-defense. That's not what the President requested, nor what he asked for. But, as part of the final agreement, we want to see Iran not funding regional instability, nor regional terrorism, and of course not trying to rebuild its nuclear weapons program. That's the main thing. Thank you. The nuclear weapons program was destroyed. If the Iranians decided tomorrow to build a nuclear weapon, they simply wouldn't have the capability to do so. We are trying to ensure that they don't rebuild that capability not just a year from now, not just 2 years from now, but for many years, so that our children never have to worry about a state sponsor of terrorism having a nuclear weapon. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. You said you hope this agreement will stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. But based on what has been released from the Memorandum of Understanding, how does this ensure that Iran will never get a nuclear weapon? What prevents them from, later on to your point, rebuilding and starting again from where we were before the war?
Well, they would have to get money to rebuild the nuclear program. You're talking about billions in nuclear infrastructure that the United States destroyed. To rebuild that program, they would need a lot of money. We have suffocated them economically, and we will only release it when they change. What would it be like? That would mean an inspection regime. It would mean real oversight, like the memorandum calls for the destruction of their enriched stockpile. All these are the steps you will take if you are serious about ending your nuclear weapons program, and that's why I keep coming back to this fundamental agreement. They need money for everything. Their economy is in a state of calamity. But for them to have any integration into the world economy, they will have to show us and prove to us that they are changing their behavior. And that's why the agreement is set up the way it is.
The round of negotiations got off track. Are you worried that he'll make you the scapegoat?
No, not at all. I think the president was just joking, like he always does. But no, look, the whole team did a great job on this, and we brought this to a really good level for the American people. Now, I've seen some progressive criticism directed at me personally saying, what experience does the Vice President of the United States have with high-stakes hostile negotiations? I'd remind those progressive critics that just 2 days ago, I spent over an hour on The View. So I have good experience with very hostile negotiations. And I use that. Look, Joy Behar is tougher than the Iranians. And she and I are best friends now. So let's get to a good place here. Let's get to a good place. We're already in a good place. We just need to know if we can really put the cherry on top, completely transforming Iran's relationship with the world. Go ahead.
Just a few questions about the timeline, right? As soon as the MOU is finalized, how long will it take for Iran to start selling some of its oil that was seized due to the blockade? And second, could you explain a bit about the Lebanon component in the MOU? How does that track work and how is it implemented?
Yes, so the Lebanon component is about regional peace, right? It's about regional peace. What that means is the region. We expect that Hezbollah will not fire rockets or launch drones at the Israelis, and we also expect that the Israelis will not do anything in Lebanon, right? Both sides need to fulfill their part of the agreement. As you know, sometimes these ceasefires are complicated. President Zua said, for some weeks now, a ceasefire in that part of the world only means that they're shooting at each other less than before. What you've seen is great progress in Lebanon and fewer shots, less shooting, but still you're going to have these small flare-ups from time to time. This is the kind of thing we're going to have to manage through the diplomatic process. Secretary Rubio has been partly responsible for this. Actually, this has worked well because we have far fewer exchanges of fire, but it's something we're going to have to manage. And finally, what we want to see is the Lebanese government, the elected representatives of the people of Lebanon, able to police southern Lebanon so that Hezbollah doesn't take over the country. The Israelis are not threatened, and therefore they are not attacking southern Lebanon or Beirut either. That's the plan. You asked about Iranian oil. Look, one of the interesting things you've seen is that the Iranians have been completely unable to sell oil, not because of sanctions, but because of the blockade. Basically, what we did here originally, what we give, what they give, was to say that we will lift the blockade, allow you to sell part of your oil, and they will open the Strait of Hormuz. We're already seeing this process start to work. It's going to take time to really get going, but that's where we are today.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The memorandum only covers the strait and ensures 60 days of toll-free passage. After that, it will be up to regional dialogue with Amman and Iran to decide the future governance of the strait. A senior official from Zexua said yesterday that they expect Iran to push hard on this, but also that the Gulf states will not allow any tolls. How intensely will the Zexua fight to keep tolls out of the strait and prevent fees on future commercial traffic through the strait? And are you going to leave it to the Gulf states, let's say, to fight that battle?
Well, first of all, we believe that international waterways should be toll-free. That has always been our position. That's what you see, of course, in the memorandum's 60-day provision. And when you say that this leaves it open, it actually doesn't, except in the sense that, of course, the final negotiation will define the terms of what comes next, right? You said, I think, that it's the Omanis and the Iranians, but actually the Memorandum of Understanding states that the Omanis, Iranians, and the Gulf Coast Coalition together will define an adequate security framework for the straits in the future. We definitely don't want this to happen again. This isn't about collecting tolls. It's about ensuring that the straits never again become a choke point for the global economy. Honestly, that's not what the Iranians want. It's not what the Omanis want, nor what the GCC wants. So what we're going to do, of course, with our allies in the region is make sure that's in the final agreement. If that's not in the final agreement, there won't be an agreement. That's what I always come back to. This basic structural point of this negotiation, the fact that we hold all the cards. If the Iranians want the benefits of the agreement, they have to give us the things that are necessary to get those benefits. You may proceed.
Thank you, Vice President.
We'll take both of your questions. First the one in white, then the one in orange, I believe.
And the one in pink?
Sorry. Okay, maybe I'm a bit colorblind. To me, it really looks more orange. I don't want to argue about it. Orange, kind of pinkish. You go first, and then the person in front of you can go second.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. How do these points about granting some immediate sanctions waivers, especially those from the Treasury Department, reconcile with the Iran Nuclear Agreement Review Act? And are you planning to inform Congress about this part?
I spoke with James Braid, our Chief of Legislative Affairs. We'll inform Congress soon. They likely received the signed document today or will later. We're planning a briefing. I believe the House is not in session right now, and the Senate is, though I could have that reversed. We'll ensure staff informs Congress and answers their questions. We have been doing this informally, of course, talking to several people in Congress over the past week. We will continue and we'll have a formal briefing. I'm not going to say exactly when that's going to happen because it depends a bit on the session schedule. Your point about the sanctions is, I'll go back to what I said before. Actually, the bottleneck regarding Iranian oil was never the sanctions. We didn't see that as a major concession to the Iranians. Frankly, they didn't see it that way either, because what was stopping them from selling oil? It wasn't the sanctions. They were selling a lot of oil without a discount, because at that time the sanctions were almost ineffective. What they really did was push the Iranian financial system towards something like a parallel banking system. So, lifting the blockade was the most important change. And by lifting the sanctions, we'll be able to see more clearly where their financial system actually sends money and where it receives it from. That's a real benefit for the American people. That's actually the only thing that changed with the change in sanctions. That gives Congress back... Sorry, I forgot that part of the question. Sir, no, we don't think so. In fact, we have an opinion from the OLC. We're quite confident about that. There are certain things that require congressional approval. There are certain things that do not require congressional approval. We're confident we can temporarily suspend these sanctions without needing Congress's approval.
If we're talking about behavior on the part of Iran, October 7th happened. And if there's concern that maybe Hezbollah could end up doing something on that scale, then, how exactly are we talking about the United States response? If we're talking about the possibility of an attack happening on a huge scale, are we waiting for that kind of attack? I mean, what exactly would be considered a large scale here?
Sorry, did you say what exactly do you mean by scale?
Well, I mean, what kind of attack would it take to really provoke a reaction from the United States to the point of saying, okay, now we're really going to start dropping bombs on Iran for bad behavior?
Well, we don't want any escalation of any attack. Any attack, whatever the scale, is unacceptable under this agreement. Now, you asked the question saying that oil money was flowing to Hezbollah before the MOU was signed, and that's one of the reasons why we are in fact involved in this process, to ensure that no money goes to Hezbollah. So it's interesting when people say that the MOU is bad, because the MOU has consequences that in fact were already happening long before the MOU was signed. This is not a reflection of the MOU. This is a reflection of why we need the MOU to ensure that we have the peace and regional stability that we need. Now, what I would say, to some of the critics of the agreement that I've heard say, well, Iran is going to get all this benefit. I'll repeat what I said, and I'll probably have to repeat this several times. What is the benefit that the Iranians get that they didn't have before? And the answer is nothing. They gain nothing unless they change their behavior. If they change their behavior, that's something to celebrate, which will transform the Middle East for a generation. If they don't change their behavior, they don't get the benefit of the deal. And I believe, I have to be very honest, that deep down, this idea that it's a distortion of the Memorandum of Understanding, this idea that the Iranians get all these benefits before the deal is actually concluded. The idea that they get benefits before changing their behavior is deep down an argument repeated by people who want the conflict to go on indefinitely. Despite the fact that this is not good for the American people and it's not good for the region. Deep down? Way down in the red.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Red here? You mean red? Let's do it.
Okay, my bad.
Thank you. I'm wearing a really bright red.
A lot of people are wearing red. You can go first, man.
All right, thank you, man.
All right, next. All right.
Great. Could you highlight the main differences between this agreement and President Obama's agreement in 2015? And why does the administration believe this agreement is better? And secondly, Mr. Vice President, President Trump has been very clear lately about his disapproval of Bibi Netanyahu's attacks on Lebanon. Has the administration spoken directly with Bibi Netanyahu recently about the president's concerns, and what has been Israel's response?
Yes, so we have spoken with Bibi, or someone from the Israeli government, just as we speak with the Gulf Coalition, our regional partners, almost every day, at least at some high level of our government. Look, the president has been clear. He is not withdrawing support from Israel. No one can withdraw support from another country. Israel has the right to defend itself. But fundamentally, the Israelis, just like everyone else, need to respect this peace process, which is fundamentally good for them and good for the whole region. What has frustrated the president at times is that it seems like we are very close to a major breakthrough in the agreement, and then suddenly there is a big explosion in a civilian center in Beirut. And many people who have nothing to do with Hezbollah lose their lives. This is not acceptable. That's why we are calling for closer coordination to ensure that this doesn't happen. And our message to the Israelis, as well as to everyone else, is basically that we want this peace process to be good for you. We don't want Hezbollah to attack Israel. But to make sure that happens, we actually need to build the kind of regional structure that can cut off funding to Hezbollah, cut off Iranian support to Hezbollah, and also ensure that Lebanon's territorial sovereignty is respected by all parties. What's the difference between these agreements? So first of all, the two main differences aren't even in the substance of the agreement itself. But something I mentioned earlier is, first of all, the Gulf Coalition loves this agreement because they think it makes Iran weaker. They hated Obama's agreement because they thought it made Iran stronger. They know more about this and have more to lose than anyone, including the United States of America. So I trust their judgment. The second thing is where the agreement came from. You need to remember, in 2015, they built a sophisticated nuclear weapons program with a stockpile of warheads. So the perspective with which we, as the United States, approached this was, you already have a very good nuclear program. We're going to bribe you with American money so that you stop this. Our perspective and where we're coming from is that we've already destroyed your nuclear program. And so, if you promise and show verifiable ways not to rebuild it, then we're willing to grant some sanctions relief and things like that. It's a fundamentally different view. Now, there are also important differences. Obama's nuclear deal allowed enrichment. Ours will not allow it. Obama's deal allowed the stockpiling of weapons-grade material. Ours is actually leading to the destruction of that stockpile of enriched material. So there are several differences. Obama's deal gave them more than $1 billion in American cash. This deal gives them zero American cash. So there are several important differences. But I think the most relevant ones are that we are dealing with this from a position of strength and that our Gulf Coast partners love this deal. No, sorry, I was talking about the other one further back.
Thank you, Mary Margaret from Daily Wire. The president said that if Iran doesn't behave, we will resume military action. So, what is the red line for what Iran can do before crossing that line and we resume military action?
Well, it will be a holistic approach where we will assess their behavior. Do they finance terrorism? Do they lead attacks against others? Are they seeking centrifuges to restart the nuclear program? We'll ask several questions to determine if their behavior has truly changed. Do they let the inspectors in as they promised, or do they refuse to let them in? We will be watching a number of things. We are working for a successful resolution of this process. But again, it takes two to tango. And what the president says is that we maintain an economic, diplomatic, and military advantage that no one else in the world has. So, if the Iranians want to change, great, we will help them. If they don't change, we still hold all the cards. Thank you, yes. Sorry, the one in the blue jacket. Correct. Mr. Vice President, this is the blue suit. Should we debate the difference between blue and navy blue? No, not that guy. Why do you always give a speech whenever you're asked a question? I'll give her a chance. What?
Reaction.
Wait.
A lot of frustration among the guys.
You're interrupting the question.
There has been a lot of frustration among Americans, especially with the gas prices that you reported, and the incoming president has been making a big deal out of it. But when should they expect to see gas prices reach $3?
Well, I'm not an economist, and I think even economists can get that wrong. But as you saw, gas prices have dropped about 65 cents per gallon on the national average, and oil prices are pretty close to where they were at the start of the conflict. I think you're going to see a good drop in gas prices. I'm not going to predict the exact price.
If I could do that, maybe I'd be in a different business, not politics. But we think you'll see significant relief at the pumps, beyond what we've already seen. Go ahead.
You keep saying that Iran will reap economic rewards if it complies and changes its behavior. With this agreement, they can now sell their oil freely. Once again, how is this not a financial benefit? And they can do it without any new concrete nuclear commitments. So, isn't this a loss for them?
They committed to destroying the highly enriched stockpile they have. We restored things to their pre-conflict state and lifted the blockade which we imposed after the conflict began. Straits are open. This isn't a new advantage for the Iranians. They sold oil for many, many years, long before we imposed the blockade. We opposed that blockade. They stopped selling oil. We have lifted the blockade to support the free, continuous flow of energy worldwide.
Having secured some of these gentlemen's agreements with Iran on certain aspects of the negotiation, therefore, regarding highly enriched uranium, can you explain what was secured even in these informal agreements about how they will get rid of their stockpile? Are there agreements on low-level enrichment? What is the moratorium on uranium enrichment for Iran? And are any of these agreements of yours written down anywhere?
Yes, some of them are written, but fundamentally, whether written or spoken, that's why we structured the deal. Because we don't trust words, we trust actions. And therefore, we will reward conduct, and we will not reward words, whether they are written on paper or not. There is a lot of discussion, the evil, the gentleman's agreements, the final agreement. Words don't matter, ladies and gentlemen. We're here to verify. And so, what we're going to do is say, if they do the things they promised to do, they promised not to enrich. They promised they would allow inspectors to destroy that stockpile, and then, of course, it's no longer usable, you take it somewhere else. They promised things, and because of that, the agreement includes benefits if they do so. But it does nothing if they don't actually and concretely fulfill those promises. Go ahead, continue.
If they don't fulfill the commitment, the US will reimpose sanctions and the blockade, or Iran may keep some of the concessions it has already secured.
Well, the sanctions remain except for the oil sanctions, which I mentioned were no longer effective. The goal of the oil sanctions is to reduce the price Iran charges per barrel. These sanctions had already stopped being effective. The blockade is effective, and that's what changed with the opening of the Strait of Hormuz. No sanction will be lifted unless they comply with the agreement, and every sanction will be reinstated. Let me hypothetically say, let's say that in 2 years they have done what we need to see in the nuclear program and we lift the sanctions, as the agreement provides. Then they decide they're going to start rebuilding the nuclear program. Of course, those sanctions will come back, and that's why it's really like a button. As they increase their good behavior, we can increase the economic relief. If they decrease their good behavior, we can turn it off. Having leverage is an advantage, and being the United States gives us significant influence in the global economic and financial systems.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you for your time. It's unrealistic to pass the Save America Act by attaching FISA as the president wants. Do you believe that's possible?
Well, why don't we try? Why don't we try to force people to vote against it? I get frustrated when people approach the legislative process assuming something isn't possible and don't even try. Let's see what actually happens. Let's try, and if it's not possible, then let people sign their names. That's also good for the American people. How many American senators know that the American people love the Save America Act? Because they believe in voter identification, but how many of those same senators don't want to vote on it? Because they know radical elements in their party would punish them? Let people speak out and answer to the American people. And that's why I think we should do exactly what the president said, Rob.
Mr. Vice President, as you know, since you were involved in this process, the Memorandum of Understanding allows Iran to sell its oil immediately, which means Iran can raise tens of millions of dollars every month. Iran's economy was in shambles. How does that not give Iran an economic lifeline? And what prevents Iran from using all that money, all those millions of dollars, to support its proxies in the region, for example, those in Yemen and Syria?
Well, the main thing is that now we can see where the money moves because of what we did with the financial sanctions. We know where the money is going to move. At this moment, the Iranian nation has a population of 94 million people. Its economy is in free fall and out of control, with very high inflation and billions of dollars in significant damage to its industrial base over the last 3 months. The idea that selling a few $1 million worth of oil will fundamentally transform the Iranian economy is simply not true. We think it would be good for everyone to lift the blockade and open the Strait of Hormuz, thus allowing the free flow of energy. We felt it was reasonable that if we allowed others to sell energy, we should allow everyone to sell energy. That's all we're doing. We can put everything back in place if the Iranians don't make the deal we're hoping for, right? Thank you.
Any yes, no. Guys, what about you two?
Go ahead, Mr. Vice President. President Trump said, let's finish referring to Iran, and he said Cuba is next. Cuba is next. In Colombia, Mr. Vice President, he mentioned Colombia 3 times this week. Why is the president's election day in Colombia so important?
You have to ask Marcos about Cuba. That's right. Look, our overall view. You can continue in a second, but let me answer his question. Fundamentally, Cuba has a system that hasn't worked. They can't make money. Their economy is frankly maybe even worse than the Iranian economy, and it's just 90 miles from our coast. So, every time there's a crisis, you end up having refugees or desperate people who can't feed their families trying to flood into our country. We want the people of Cuba to be happy and successful. We're talking with the Cuban government right now about how they could change the way they operate and change that. Let's see what they do. And of course, if they do one thing, we'll do another. If they make smart decisions, we'll have a much better relationship with that island.
You may continue, Mr. Vice President. Thank you very much, really. I know you're still not completely sure if you'll run for president in 2028, but if you end up not running, is there anyone in particular you'd like to see? Ron, what exactly is your full name? Stephen Kapuska.
I would really like Stephen Kapuska to run for president. You may continue. You may continue.
You may proceed. Thank you. Mr. Vice President, I have 2 questions. Can you describe the situation regarding your trip to Switzerland? Are you still going? What are your plans? And also, if we could go deeper into the frozen funds, there has been a lot of focus on oil sanctions. But regarding these funds, what is your understanding of how much money is frozen? How much of that is in the ZUA? And a senior government official told some of our reporters earlier this week that there could be small initial releases of money. That's what he said, small releases of money to build trust with the Iranians right from the start. Can you describe this whole situation?
So, about the frozen funds, honestly, I don't know the total. I've heard numbers above $100 billion. Actually, I've heard numbers above $200 billion. Most of that is not in accounts in the United States. Most of it is in the Gulf, in Europe, or somewhere else. But I don't know the exact amount. It's a lot. It's one of the reasons why we've had such a successful stranglehold on the Iranian economy, although it's by no means the main reason. We won't release any money until the Iranians comply. There are several ways we're going to release $1 of that. For example, let's say they really take important steps, and this can happen very quickly to destroy that stockpile of enriched material, so we'll talk about it, but they have to comply. I saw some reports, I don't know where they came from, that the Qataris had released billions of dollars in Iranian assets. That's simply not true. It would be impossible for the Qataris to do that without our approval, and certainly without us seeing it. So a lot of these reports are fundamentally wrong. They don't receive even $1 from unfrozen assets. It's their money, not ours. Not until they actually comply according to the agreement. You asked about Switzerland. Our plan is to go to Switzerland. I don't know exactly when. The way we're structuring this technical negotiation is obvious. We're going to have political leadership involved, and people on the ground actually conducting the technical talks, the nuclear talks. How you destroy that highly enriched uranium. All of this requires you to get into the details. So I plan to go to Switzerland. As for exactly when, we thought these technical negotiations would start sometime this weekend. That's still the plan, but it might change since Iran isn't an easy country to get out of. We're trying to determine exactly when it will happen. I think it's this weekend, but I'm unsure.
Aren't you going to Switzerland tomorrow?
Yes. Maybe. It just depends on when the Iranians can get there. We're trying to figure that out now, but again, I suspect it'll be this weekend. We'll find out exactly as the next few days go by.
Mayor, thank you very much. Senior Vice President, just 2 questions to follow up on an earlier question. Secretary Rubio said in March that the goal of this war was, I quote, to eliminate the threat of Iran's short-range ballistic missiles. You said earlier that the military program was destroyed. Intelligence estimates from Zepelwola indicate that Iran still retains about 70% of the stockpile of ballistic and cruise missiles it had before the war. So, when did the government decide to abandon that part of the original mission? And secondly, moving forward, you are leading the ZUAR team from now on regarding the negotiations. How involved will you be?
Yes, I am certainly planning to lead the ZUAR negotiation team. But regarding the first question, you mentioned an intelligence report that was anonymously leaked to a reporter without context and that frankly is not accurate. What has changed regarding the Iranians, regarding the Iranian ballistic missile program, is that the number of missiles they have, the number of projectiles, matters much less now. What matters much more is the number of launchers they have and above all the ground crews who have the capability to launch those missiles. Their ability to launch missiles has been substantially degraded. Did it reach 0? No, but it was substantially degraded. And in that sense, we did not abandon the mission. We completed that specific part of it. If you look at the Gulf Arab allies and of course the Israelis who faced a lot, the two together bore the brunt of those missile attacks. Each of them feels much safer today in the face of the Iranian missile threat than they did before. Obviously, it's something we would like to maintain. All the president said yesterday was that you can't expect any country to give up its right to self-defense. There needs to be parity, and that's what the President of the United States was talking about. You may proceed. No, guys, really?
Did you see what Pope Leo's reaction was to the MOU? to the memorandum?
I have.
What did he say? Right, okay, I'll give you the short version. Trolls MOU, sir. Sorry, right, he said for you to go ahead. After you, I'll give the short version. He says he welcomes the agreement between the U.S. and Iran. He says he hopes this will help strengthen mutual trust and security.
And stability in the Middle East. He also hopes this will help end the war and that it is truly over. What do you say to the Pope?
Sir, my answer is praise be to Jesus. I am glad that the Pope says good things about our memorandum of understanding. I think he is basically right, and this will be good for the whole world. We must keep working to ensure the Iranians meet their commitments. Yes, you in the front, go ahead.
How is your book going?
The problem is there are a lot of people here. If I mention the red tie, 9 of you will start shouting. The tie really stood out.
There he is, that guy.
Thank you. The Memorandum of Understanding calls for CSFCO troops to withdraw from the Gulf region as part of the final agreement. Can you say if the reduction will affect ZUA's forces in Iraq and Syria, where American troops currently help protect Kurdish-controlled areas against Iran-backed militias?
Right? So the planned reduction, again, is part of the final agreement. That assumes the Iranians comply and give us verification that they are taking substantial steps toward this peace agreement. What we're saying is that we will withdraw the troops to the pre-conflict level, which means we won't keep some additional carrier groups there. The Iranians don't want that. Frankly, we don't want that either. You may proceed. Yes, you said that the Hardira are...
It won't fund this $300 billion fund. Who is funding this exactly? Are they private companies? And I noticed your voice is hoarse. Are you sick? Have you been using your voice a lot?
Well, I've been on a book tour for the last 2 days, but I can't promote it here in the White House press room. I caught a cold about a week ago. That's from talking a lot about this agreement and about the book. I'm actually a little hoarse, but you asked. Your first question was about who exactly is providing those $300 billion. I understand. So, what's interesting about this is that there is a strong desire, both from the Arab world and from outside the Arab world, to actually engage with Iran if they behave properly. So, for example, let's say the United Arab Emirates, which has been a great ally not only in recent months but for many years, wants to invest in building a power plant. That, in fact, is impossible right now because of how the sanctions from the Isfos Newara efforts work. So, what we're saying is, if you behave and if the Emiratis themselves want to build a power plant, we will provide the necessary sanctions relief to make that possible. The good side of this is that it actually creates integration, right? Which is leverage. A world where the Gulf Coast Coalition has greater influence over the Iranian economy is a world where the Iranians will be strongly deterred from misbehaving. So much of the Gulf community, again, sees a weakened Iran. They see a chance to build a new relationship there. And they say that if they behave and if the United States lets this happen, then for sure we want to change our relationship with Iran. Well, I mean, I imagine that in the United Arab Emirates there would be private money and so on. That would be part of it. But again, that's pretty far ahead because it assumes a change in Iranian behavior. Sir?
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. As you know, Iran-backed groups in the region have been involved in this war and damaged facilities of the United Arab Emirates and allies. How does this agreement affect the groups supported by Iran throughout the region, especially the groups supported by Iran in Iraq? And my second question. This agreement requires Iran to stop attacking the Kurdish opposition in the Kurdistan region, which they did 2 days ago.
So basically, in this agreement, it requires Iran to act like a normal country. And if it doesn't act that way, as many believe it never will, it won't get any of the economic benefits. And if they do, then that's great for everyone. It's great for the Kurds. It's great for anyone who has been a direct target or has been under threat from terrorist organizations funded by Iran. The expectation is that Iran will stop doing that. If they don't stop, they lose the agreement's benefits. John.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Many of the colleagues you served with in the U.S. Senate and the Republican Conference have criticized this agreement in the last 24 hours. What exactly is your message, Mr. Vice President, to all of them?
So, I would say to everyone, to any critic, first, have a little faith in the President of the United States. The idea that he would make a bad deal for the American people is absurd. He had the courage to profoundly change our relationship with Iran and with many other countries in the past year and a half. He believes in this deal. He will see it through to the end. And if the Iranians don't comply, we still have each and every tool and leverage point that we have today. That would be the message. Message number one. Have a little faith in the president's ability, since he brought us this far to take the final step. The second thing I would say is that much of what I've read or heard that people believe about this deal is simply, at its core, false. It's a memorandum of understanding. Fundamentally, the principle is that yes, the Strait of Hormuz will be open immediately, and it already is. Yes, they will give up their highly enriched material, but they really need to do that. It's a matter of conduct. It's about rewarding good behavior and punishing bad behavior, which in a way is what we've been doing for the past 3 months with that country. Anyway, so a lot of the criticism I've seen, Lindsey Graham made a positive statement after expressing some concerns. I think that when people understand not only the agreement but also our negotiating stance as a country, they will see that this is excellent for the American people. But that's part of our job. We need to explain what this means for Americans and how it will make all of us safer and more prosperous. That's why I'm here talking to everyone, and we'll keep telling this story in the days and weeks to come. Go ahead. Thank you, sir. Jordan Conrad from Gateway Pundit. I want to go back to talking about the pulpit in Lebanon. There's a report on Axios about Netanyahu's future.
Fuming about it, he isn't. Israel doesn't feel bound by the Memorandum of Understanding with Lebanon. If, as you mentioned, your frustration with Israel over it hitting buildings in Beirut continues, it could torpedo the agreement. And what would Zua's response be to a wider war in Lebanon?
Yes. Well, I don't want to get into hypotheticals that could sink the agreement, because I think the president's expectation is that all our friends, the Israelis, the Arabs in the region, work together and conclude this agreement. Now, I saw the Axios report. Do you know that Netanyahu is furious? That doesn't match my talks with him, but he might say things to others he wouldn't say to me. What I'll say, and this really bothers me, is that you've seen people in Bibi's cabinet attacking the agreement. And in a way, they personally attacked the President of the United States. And I think my message to him would be twofold. First of all, Donald J. Trump is the only head of state in the entire world who is truly and unequivocally supportive of the nation of Israel at this exact moment in history. And by the way, he is the head of state of the greatest superpower. If I were in the Israeli government cabinet, I might not attack the only powerful ally I have left in the entire world at this exact moment. And the second message I would give to some of those cabinet members. Bibi, to his credit, did not follow this path. But there are some of those cabinet members in Israel who attack the President of the United States. Another thing I would say is that in the last 3 months, 2/3 of the defensive weapons that protected your homeland were built by American hands and paid for by American taxes. The problem for Israel is not Donald J. Trump, and anyone in Israel who thinks their biggest problem is the President of the United States needs to wake up and face the reality of the situation this country is in. Thank you all.